So here's the thing about emotional pain. It actually hurts. Believe it or not, physical and emotional pain are registered in exactly the same area in your brain. So when you say your feelings have been hurt, you actually mean that you are in pain. And yet when it comes to the level of attention and care and focus that we give to our emotional hurts, it pales in comparison to what we would give to an equivalent physical injury. And so much of this is down to the attitude towards emotions in our family of origin. As kids, we need guidance to be able to work our way through really strong, particularly negative emotions. And unfortunately, parents don't always have the skills available to them to allow kids the safe environment they need to learn to nurture their emotional experience, and consequently children develop a paradigm for emotions that involves numbing or denial or avoiding dealing with them. And unfortunately this carries on into adulthood, and oftentimes the coping mechanisms that one develops in order to deal with the more intense emotions that life inevitably brings are quite pathological and can really result in a lot of struggle in areas such as relationship and self-worth. But there's also a cultural paradigm for emotions that is very much focused on positivity at all costs. And this isn't very helpful either, because what it results in is us layering guilt upon our emotional experience. You know, we're feeling sad, or we're feeling jealousy or envy, or we're feeling rejection, and then we're feeling bad because we're feeling bad, and we tell ourselves that we should feel good. And it's this layering of emotion that can cause so much damage. And yes, there is always an opportunity for growth. There is always an opportunity to develop more resilience in adversity. However, we can't bypass the actual emotional experience. Unfortunately, the only way to experience emotions is to feel them, you know. And I suppose it's about finding a middle ground. It's about recognizing your emotional experience and fully acknowledging it and honoring it and listening to it, because again, our emotions are there for a reason. They're a powerful messenger if we just learn to hear what they have to say and interpret them. We don't want to over identify or wallow in our emotions, but nor do we want to deny or suppress them. And this can feel like a very tempting option when we're experiencing a very intense negative emotional response, or indeed when our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response has been activated, because they feel distressing, they feel uncomfortable. So it goes without saying we're going to want to fast track our way out of there. And yet, when we are able to tolerate that sensation inside of us and listen to it and give it the attention that it requires, we build inner strength and we build the capacity to deal with life, because ultimately our emotions are just emotions, and yes, they are valid, and yes, they need care, and yes, they have very important messages in them. However, they are feelings, you know, and they pass just like everything else. We also need to recognize that our emotions drive so many of our thoughts and behaviors, particularly our emotional experiences that are based on our past, or that are based on some sort of pain that we have experienced along the way. So we need to be very mindful, first of all, that when we try to selectively numb emotions, it doesn't work. When we try to numb out our pain, we also numb our capacity for joy and for love and for creation and for, you know, being able to find meaning in things, because we're just numbing off a whole aspect of ourselves, a whole aspect of our authentic experience. And it's also recognizing as well that we need to be very mindful of the stories that we create as a consequence of our emotional experiences, because we feel a feeling and then all of a sudden we tell ourselves a story to match, and oftentimes this isn't necessarily accurate. And the more we aware we are of our emotional responses and the stories that we have a tendency tendency to create as a consequence, the more able we are to trust our behaviours, because we will be more clued in, we'll be less reactive and more responsive to our life. We'll also be able to forgive ourselves a lot easier, because oftentimes when we experience setbacks or failures in life, we give it a very emotional context, and generally we find a way of blaming who we are, as opposed to recognizing the role that external circumstances has in what has happened and how things have played out. So it's been able to recognize that just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that that reflects reality, and you're able to be that little bit more objective when you're more clued in to how it is that you're likely to feel in certain scenarios. Plus, there is just this capacity for connection with other people. I mean, when we're able to share our emotional experience, good, bad, and indifferent, it's beautiful. It allows other people into our world. It allows other people into our life. And that's what it's all about. You know, we tend to assume that the only emotions that we can share are the positive ones. And yet, when we create a space for some of the negative emotions as well, when we are honest about who it is and how we feel, we give other people the room and the space to be honest also, and we create a deeper level of connection in our relationships. It also paves the way for curiosity and creativity. I mean, so much of the creative aspect of our side comes from our emotional experience. I mean, you see some of the greatest music and the greatest art being created out of sadness and rejection and loss, and in order to tap into that, we actually need to feel those feelings, and yet we tend to tell ourselves that we can't feel them, that nothing good can come of them. And it's Viktor Frankl that says that when we apply meaning to adversity, and this isn't, an exact quote, that the suffering is alleviated to a certain extent. And it's not, as I said, that you have to fast track your way to finding meaning and finding the lesson in your pain and adversity, but it's recognizing that when you resist it, when you try to get rid of it prematurely, that unfortunately all you end up doing is pushing it down. And again, it's like that beach ball, you're pushing it down and you're pushing it down, and yet it keeps bobbing up and rearing its ugly head. Whereas if we can just sit with it and honor it and try to look at it from different perspectives, as opposed to just seeing it from the kind of poor me, this is terrible, life is never going to be any different. If we can look at it and be like, what am I being taught here? What can I learn about myself? Is there a possibility that at some stage this is going to take on a different meaning? And as I said, it's not that you have to fast track your way to that place, but oftentimes our richest experiences and capacity to help other people come from our own pain and our own struggle. So it's just about being able to recognize that sometimes the bad things that happen have a place in our life, and us trying to avoid them or deny them or resist them isn't helping us to move through them and transcend them. So it's living intentionally with attention. It's recognizing that a certain amount of emotional pain is inevitable, and the more skilled you are at dealing with it, the less likely it is to pull you under. So live with meaning, live with purpose, and allow yourself to feel exactly what it is that you feel. If you would like to get better at regulating your emotions or even recognizing your emotional experience, then get in touch with me on the website. It's fundamentals.ie.